A message from the oracle. Tell me your secrets. Tell me your fears. Tell me your desires. Tell me what you wish to hear. I'll tell you answers. I'll tell you your future. I'll divine. I'll scry. I'll see everything that you might need. They'll hear my warning, heed my advice. This sacred insight comes only at a price. What I do tell can change your life. Knowledge can only come at a great sacrifice. So tell me your wishes, tell me your thoughts, tell me your dreams, and give me your heart.
Hi everyone!
Hi!
Welcome to the very first myth-related podcast. We're tentatively calling this Myth Adventures, unless we come up with a better name.
Right.
Although we kind of like that one, so that's probably what it's gonna be.
Yeah.
This is Kaylin Boyd. She is the author of Tell City, which you just heard a poem out of. And she's also just a fabulous writer and my best friend.
And this is my best friend, whom I met on Craigslist. There we go.
Right. I love that story.
I do. All right. And she is a wonderful, spectacular, amazing photographer who specializes in underwater photography. And she is also a book cover designer and the interior designer and my editor and practically my literary. She just does everything.
I love books.
I like books. And yeah. So... Right.
So, we both really like myths, and we like talking and having long conversations and in-depth just exploring ideas and that sort of thing, and we figured it would be cool to try and make a podcast about it.
Yeah.
So
we'll see how that works.
Yes. This is our first go, and we're going to see how it goes.
Great.
So...
What are we talking about today, Elise?
Well...
I'm glad you asked, Kaylin.
We are gonna, I think, set these up with sort of a loose topic each time. Kind of picking a myth or a thing from mythology and then just kind of jamming on that and seeing where the conversation takes us. So, for our first one, we are starting with Cupid. Which is why we started with the poem that ends with "Give me your heart." And we also started with the anatomical heart painting that goes with Tell City. And so now Kay is going to read a small part of Tell City that talks about her version of the character of Cupid.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about why I ended up putting Cupid in there. And closer to the beginning, there's a dream that Charles is having where in the dream it says, true love's arrows could not save him. They could, however, destroy him. And that is why I put Cupid as a villain, and he makes such an awesome villain. Like, I love him in my head. Like, I love him.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why we're doing Cupid is because my brain has been honing in on him and exploring him because I want to work more with him and his myth.
He's an interesting character, too, because he has a lot of different representations in myth.
Yeah. So, and then we were also talking about how the arrow is a symbol of Tell City because of their actual folk hero named William Tell, which is where they got the name from.
Right.
I came up with a different fantasy version, though.
Yeah, well, and... it's interesting that the arrow sort of becomes a thing in your version of Tell City, so much so that every chapter starts with that picture of the arrow
and the apple.
Piercing the apple, which comes from the myth of Tell City and of William Tell, of him shooting an apple on his son's head, I think it is.
Yeah, his story kind of resembles Robin Hood.
Right.
From what I read.
Yeah. Maybe
he's a Scottish folk hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we'll do a different episode about William Tell.
That'd be cool. Because I definitely didn't do him any sort of justice in the actual version of Tell City.
No, I mean, we sort of... Yeah. There's nods to him in the Tell City and in the apple.
And the entire reason I just fell in love with the name Tell City. I was like, well, why would it be called Tell City? And it's because it's a city that tells you what you need to know.
Right.
Hence
so that's what happens
poem at the beginning.
Yes, and that's what happens in Kay's novel Tell City, is that Tell City is the home of the last oracle on Earth, and so that oracle tells you things. All right, so let's hear about Cupid.
Right. So, Cupid and Psyche divorced eons back, when the real Roman Empire lay down to die and took its gods with it. The divorce was a long, drawn-out spectacle where, of course, she took him for everything he owned. His mother rubbed it in every chance she got. I told you so. It was an embarrassment. He had become a laughingstock among the gods. The god of love himself had failed at keeping a woman happy. As the gods began to fade from this world, Cupid's heart grew bitter. His love had left him. The world and the people had abandoned him. No one believed in love, true love, anymore. Not like in the older days when the lovers would die for love. Odysseus and Penelope, Achilles and Patroclus, Thisbe and Pyramus, Apollo and Hyacinth, no one, not people, not gods, not even Cupid himself, loved that hard anymore. And if they did, they might think his mother Venus or Aphrodite, but usually they think Jesus. Cupid himself never got any thanks. He was now viewed as a chubby little cherub with a diaper rash, which, in all honesty, was more of an embarrassment than the divorce. Thus, when Claire Miel let him in on his plan for the last remaining oracle, Cupid gladly readied his arrows.
I just love Tell City. And yeah, there's the arrows again. So, it's interesting too because did you know this, like, the reason that Tell City was called Tell City because of William Tell and that story of the arrows when you first started writing it, or did you not?
I don't quite remember. I don't think I did, because I don't think I really found out about William Tell until I was at least 4 chapters in, and maybe 3, and that's when I also went to Tell City.
Right. Which you only did because you were writing about it, right?
Right, exactly.
Like, you just passed it on the highway and saw the name.
Right.
And thought that would be cool. And incorporated it, and then later went to Tell City just to check it out and realized, like, oh my god, they have arrows and I have like, it's just cool how that works out sometimes.
Serendipitous.
Yes. Very synchronistic.
Synchronistic. Yes. Yes, indeed.
Both. Which, actually, speaking of serendipity and synchronicity, that sort of ties into another point that we were making, that the beginning of that chapter that you just read has the line that Cupid and Psyche divorced eons ago.
Right.
Is it aeons or eons? Because those are different things.
It was supposed to be aeons, but it got edited to eons, and I didn't catch it in time.
Right.
But
so it was written, you wrote it originally as aeons.
Aeons.
And explain what the difference is.
Well, at the time when I wrote Aeons, it was just because I still am a huge fan of Aleister Crowley, and he used that word, and I wanted to use it too. But it's a different type of time. So, Aeons is, it had something to do with gods, and it's a different type of time. It's related to Kairos rather than Chronos, which again are 2 different types of time in Greek mythology. Chronos is more linear, right?
Chronos, like, we still use the name Chronos today in our words chronological, which means, linear and in a row. And it also, Chronos was the time according to the clock and, like, the measurements, and so it was much more structured, so that's the more masculine energy type of time or view of time. And then
Kairos.
Its counterpart is Kairos or Kyros. We're not actually sure how to pronounce it.
I took Greek in college, but you really can't tell.
Yeah, well, and if anyone knows, like, let us know in comments or something. So Kairos is the other type of time, and what's really interesting about this is I have heard. So when I was a freshman in college and taking, like, just sort of a philosophy 101 class, I remember that we touched on, like, the ancient Greek concepts of time, and that Kronos was only one of them, and the other one was this Kairos. And the way it was described by my professor was that it's basically the difference between, like, linear chronological time and emotional time. Like, he described Kairos as emotional time, and what he meant, like, what that means is that it's sort of the moments where you fall out of time. Like, so the example is a minute takes 60 seconds. That's chronological time.
But it can feel.
But depending on what you're doing, that 1 minute can feel like an hour, or it can feel like 1 second.
I just watched this clip from a Steve Martin movie on the masterclass stuff. He's just sitting there, and it's like for 3 minutes. He's like, and being with you has felt like, 10 years, because we've only been together a week, but like the first day felt like, a year, and the second day felt like just a few seconds because you ate your mother's, and then the third day felt like, a decade, and it was...
Right.
Oh my god, that was so funny. Look that up if you want to find it.
So that's Kairos, is that the idea of time not actually going with its actual chronological measurement is when it feels like something other than what it is, whether it's a minute feeling like an hour or whether it's an hour feeling like a second.
And then when I was looking this up on Wikipedia the other day with you, I remember seeing it said that Kairos is like the moment where an arrow hits the target.
Right.
Or the moment in between. It was in between because it's how long it feels.
Yeah, okay, so that makes sense. But, so what's really cool about that...
Going back to arrows?
Well, yeah, it goes back to arrows, which is really cool. It's a cool tie-in. But what's cool about that is that it's that moment of the arrow kind of like hitting its mark. And so that is also just, I've heard that described as it's like that moment when you feel the meaning. Like when things feel meaningful because you've sort of fallen out of chronological time, you're not paying attention to, it's that whole idea of like time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
That comes from the fact of like when you're really like in the flow and in the moment and having like a great conversation,
like right now,
you're working on a painting or like something that just is really like coming together perfectly, that's the moment that's described as Kairos, but then also Kairos is described as the moment of the arrow hitting its target.
Right.
And, like, so it's just so cool how there's so many different layers of meaning there that all kind of tie in together, and then to tie this back into Crowley and the whole idea of the time of the gods. So I have heard this description of like being in flow and like being in that Kairos moment where you've fallen out of time and like time is flying by because you're having so much fun, and
or
like
in Aleister Crowley's case, you're high on a shit ton of cocaine.
Well, hey, people have fun in different ways. I don't know. I'm not judging. But no, when you're in that like moment, that is also described in so many other places as like inspiration and divine inspiration. That's the moment when you are in touch with the divine. Well, no, that's the moment where you're in touch with the divine because
right.
You're accessing this inspiration and this flow.
Like right now.
Yeah, definitely right now. But like, so it just all ties together. Like
Elise just thinks it's super awesome.
I do think
she's
it's super
in love
awesome.
with this concept.
I
love it when she gets in love with things.
I'm in love with a lot of things. So yeah, I mean that's just so cool how even
that one word means so much.
Well, and even that passage in Tell City, you started off with Cupid and Psyche divorced aeons ago, specifically referencing this concept of like divine time.
Yep.
And then you end that passage with Cupid readied his arrows. which just brings us straight back to, like, that moment of the arrow hitting its mark, and that is, like, the perfect synchronicity of Kiaros.
Actually, no, I totally planned this. No, I did. I totally knew all of this.
Totally did not.
I was totally in control of all this the entire time. It was the mastermind of my mastermind.
Right.
No, I had no fucking idea.
Yeah, which makes it better that you didn't know. Because it's more synchronistic. And, like, it's just, we've got so many layers here of, like, this awesome synchronicity. Right. Which is what that word is about.
Right. Because that's another Greek word, and Greek words are awesome because just everything in the Greek language, like, it has so many different layers of meaning to it, and all of their myth is just so freaking psychological. And I don't know if we get that because, you know, we're in a time after Carl Jung, and who dove us into this level of psychology, but there's just so many layers of psychology in myth, like.
You could argue that it was there, and it was just that Carl Jung noticed it and pointed it out to us. It was always there.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it's the way that I think we understand it now.
Right.
I mean, we can't really possibly understand the way that what it meant to them then, you know?
No.
But so getting on to Cupid, in Greek, because Cupid is the Latin name. In Greek, it's Eros.
Oh.
And
I forget that.
Yeah, and Eros, translated literally, means desire.
You know what's weird?
What?
Eros.
Arrow
is spelled E-R-O-S.
Like arrows.
But when you say it, it sounds an awful lot like arrows.
It also could just because I have a cold.
I mean, yeah, but even when anyone says it, it's like you can easily say that and kind of
Eros have his arrows.
Yeah, Eros readied his arrows.
Don't talk about Eros and arrows when you're drunk because you won't be able to figure out what you're talking about.
Or are you always talking about the same moment? Because, you know, maybe Eros and arrows, like the moment of that Eros.
Okay, well here, I have another thing for you because, hang on, this is super awesome. Bow and arrows, the way that we understand them today, were pretty much created almost simultaneously in a chronological order of things at the same time in multiple parts of the world where they had no contact with one another.
It's so weird how so much happened at the same time with no contact.
Right?
In the ancient days.
But no, that would be funny because we're also talking about arrows were happening at the same time. Okay.
Right. But no, so the arrow being that moment of being in sync with the divine, like how often is falling in love or being in love, which is what Cupid does, that is directly tied to that feeling of Kiaros and not paying so much attention to chronological time because you're having so much fun.
Right.
Like, it's just all totally tied together. And I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, we know. Okay, so tell us more about Cupid / Eros.
Eros. Okay. Well, in some forms of Greek myth, this is the part that I'm going to tangent on about. He was a primordial god. He was born directly out of chaos with Gaia and Nyx and Uranus. Uranus. Thank you. Uranus was Gaia's son. I got that wrong. But so he was one of the primordial gods. So
I have a question.
What?
Just for clarification, real quick.
Go for it.
Is Gaia one of the primordial gods, or is she the mother of the primordial gods?
No. She was not. She was one of them.
Okay. Who's the mother of them all?
Chaos.
Okay.
I'm
clarifying because I have heard Gaia and Chaos, they get intertwined a lot in other myths and other cosmologies.
I mean, I can see that. But so certain gods and goddesses that were primordial that came from chaos, the Greeks didn't necessarily actually have like a personification, like a human form of. They were just this thing.
Okay.
So chaos is definitely one of the things.
Mm-hmm.
I think she might have been like portrayed later on, like, you know, neo-classicalism, but otherwise chaos was just a void. It was nothing.
Right.
And so there were a handful of gods that came straight from her, and that was there were 5 of them. It was Gaia, Eros, which is desire, Nyx, which is night.
Earth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Darkness, which I can't remember what his name is at the moment. I can look it up.
From Nyx?
Yeah, Nyx is night, and darkness is somebody else.
Separate. Okay.
Yeah. Hang on. All right. Erebus, which is darkness. Nyx, which is night. Hermera, which is day. Nope, that was one of their children. Yep, that was one of their children. Sorry, guys. Pause. Oh, Gaia and Tartarus. There we go. So it would be Erebus, which is darkness. Nyx, which is night. Gaia, which is earth. And Tartarus, which is the depths and the caves beneath the earth. So,
and Cupid.
Right, and Eros. Cupid, which is Eros. Which, in some myth, he's not, because as you guys might know, or the common, mythology of Cupid is that he's Venus's son.
Right.
Which kind of
Aphrodite's son.
Aphrodite's son, right. So, Cupid,
Greek and
Eros,
Roman mythology is confusing.
Venus, Aphrodite. It's just that it's the same. It's all doubled because the Romans came.
It's exactly the same. They just gave them different names to make it confusing.
Well, because the Romans showed up and said, "Hey, we like this. We're stealing it. It's ours now."
But we got to rename it.
Yeah, we have to make it Latin because Latin is awesome, and we're Romans, and we're awesome.
Right.
And I love this book, Stephen Fry, Mythos. It's about
I love everything
Greek
Stephen Fry
myth.
does.
But I mean, I personally, because I've been so wrapped up in Eros recently, I'm a little miffed that he is not considered a primordial god here. Which all the things that happen at the beginning of this myth, it's about desire. So
even in the Greek cosmology myth.
Yeah, in
like
the very beginning,
of the
thing that what happens when we first have all the primordial gods, and then their children after that. I mean, all of that at the very beginning is about desire. They're all coupling with one another and conspiring against one another, and a lot of it is about desire. So I just feel like, of course, desire, Eros, would be there at the beginning.
At the very beginning.
So, but
so
in some of the myth, he's not.
So the way Stephen Fry lays it out, and the way some other sources obviously lay it out, is that Eros, which is desire, comes later. Like, as a result of the coupling of Mother Earth and Nyx or whatever?
Well, okay, so in the version of the Greek myth where he is not a primordial god, he is the son of Ares, which is war, and Aphrodite,
which is love. So in that version, love comes first, and then desire comes as a combination of war and love?
Well, so Venus was created from the sea foam. The sea foam was created when Kronos cut off his father's penis, he castrated him, and he threw it out into the ocean. And the reason why he did this is because his dad, which was Uranus, there we go,
Uranus and Kronos. No.
Kronos is Saturn.
Kronos is doing this
to
Uranus.
Uranus.
Right, okay.
Because,
sorry.
So Gaia...
And Saturn and
I know.
Kronos are the same.
So, hold on. This is going to get confusing. So,
as it wasn't already.
Something else that I'm writing right now, which is the continuation of my story of Cupid, is he's sitting there talking to Loki, and Cupid, Eros, corrects him on the family tree. And Loki just says, "You Greco-Romans, your family tree, trying to understand your family lineage is as much torture as sitting through an entire season of Jerry Springer. Everybody's throwing dishes, you have conniving mother-in-laws, and at the end you still don't know who the father is."
Oh, that's great. And also, I was going to say something to sort of that effect, which is that what I think is so interesting and relatable about the Greco-Roman mythology is that it is so relatable. It's just like a, soap opera drama of this. They're very human.
Right, and that's
in
what
their
I love.
Personification. Oh, yeah, no, I love it too.
Okay,
but anyway,
Venus,
so Uranus.
Uranus shoved Gaia's children back up her womb because they were ugly as hell. And these were called Hecaton Kyres, which is because they were creatures of 1,000 hands. Somehow it's also how we get the word chiropractor, I guess because you're working it back with a hand.
Huh. All right.
Hecaton Kyres, right?
Okay.
I think it's how you pronounce it. And so he shoves her children back up her womb because he doesn't like them and they're ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And so she spends a very long time trying to get her children to rise up against her hubby.
Their father.
Uranus.
And Kronos, who is also Saturn,
Right. Says
was
yes.
the one who sort of took up this call.
Right.
Okay.
And so he castrated his father, threw it out into the sea. That created Aphrodite, and I think a couple other sea creatures too. But Aphrodite, no, that happens later.
Okay.
So then Aphrodite comes up out of the sea foam. She is the embodiment of beauty and sexuality. And so when she walks, flowers grow where she steps. Birds are encircling her. She is just the epitome of beauty.
Which, that's really interesting because when you think about like these cosmology creation myths from like a psychological perspective, there's a lot there. And this is one of the instances where I feel like there's a lot there in the sense of Aphrodite being beauty and coming from the sea. Like, that all makes perfect sense.
But she also comes from usurping patricide.
Right. But the specific sequence of Kronos castrating his father and then from that landing in the sea, creating the sea foam, I guess I don't quite see the connection between those things, but it makes perfect sense to me that Aphrodite, who is beauty, comes from the sea.
That's because you love the sea. You think
No,
the sea is beautiful.
I mean I do, but sorry, I wasn't arguing with that part of that. It makes so much sense to me because, like, feminine energy
is water.
Yeah, the divine feminine energy is water. And so it makes perfect sense that beauty and that fertility and that literal flowering would all come from the sea. That makes perfect sense. But, like I said, it gets a little bit weird when you go further back in that story to what caused her to come from the sea.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's just a interesting thing.
That's why it's called semen.
Oh, no. Oh, the worst part is I can't say that you're wrong. I don't know. Never looked into the etymology of that particular word, but maybe we should.
Yeah, maybe later.
Okay, so anyways, Kronos defeats his father, right, and creates Aphrodite.
Yep.
And then Aphrodite later is the mother of Cupid.
With Ares and has Cupid.
Right, and Ares is war.
Right. But in, again, the other myth, he is a primordial god right there with Tartarus and the earth.
Right.
And, yeah.
Well, and what's interesting about the coupling of beauty and war creating desire is, I don't know, there's something that rings true in that.
Right. I personally like the idea that desire comes from nothing. If it comes from chaos, then it comes from nothing, and then it's kind of like, okay, like true love and like other emotions that you just can't quite figure out. Just this burning desire just coming up from inside you, from what?
Part of the foundation of our world.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that too. But I do also like the
coming up from love and war. Because
what's that quote? All's fair in love and war?
Yeah. Well, and then in the myth, he is one of the reasons why the Trojan War happened. It's because he made Paris fall in love with Helena of Troy.
I thought Helena of Troy got the golden apple, and
that was Strife. What happened was, okay, there's another myth. So Strife rolled the golden apple into
The party.
The party, and because Paris was there, and that might be why Paris was there. But so it said to the most beautiful goddess, and Strife I think was another one of the. She was the daughter of Nyx. Okay, so she rolls the golden apple into the party of the gods because she didn't get invited. She was pissed.
She was mad. Yeah.
And it said to the most beautiful goddess. So all the goddesses get in a fight. It was Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena. And so then they were like, okay, well, which one of us do you think is the most beautiful goddess? They say to Zeus, and Zeus says, hey, Paris, why don't you answer this question?
Because he knows better than to piss off any one of them.
Yeah, so in this myth it is Aphrodite because I'm sure she got her son Cupid to help. So he obviously chooses Aphrodite because Paris chooses Aphrodite.
Okay.
But what happened is all the goddesses try to bribe him first. Mm-hmm. And so Athena's like, I will make you the wisest man. Mm-hmm. And then Hera's like, I will make you like the wealthiest man. And Aphrodite says, I will give you the most beautiful woman. Mm. And the most beautiful woman was Helen of Troy. And so he says, hey, Aphrodite. And so then she probably gets Eros, her son, to shoot that arrow to make that happen.
So Cupid shoots the arrow to make Paris fall in love
with
Helena? Or other way around?
Yeah, Helena would have to fall in love with him. So then she runs off and Troy. And another myth, Apollo, who is, sun god and archer himself, is pretty much laughing at Cupid, being like, I'm a better archer than you. And Eros says, oh, really? You think so? Okay. So he shoots Apollo with his golden arrow, which makes him fall in love with a nymph named Daphne. And then he shoots Daphne with his lead arrow of disdain. And so Apollo is chasing after her, being like, baby, I love you. And she's like, get away from me. You're gross. You're weird. And so in order to free herself from him, she prays to her father, which I feel like was like Poseidon or somebody. Anyway, not important. She prays to whomever to turn her into something where she can get away from him. Mm-hmm. So they turn her into a tree, which is the laurel tree. And so then Apollo is crying because he can't have her, and she's a tree, and she's like, oh my god, I can't get away from you. Get off of me. I'm a tree. Now I can't do anything. And so he makes the laurel his sacred tree.
Apollo does?
Apollo does. Oh. So now he can't ever actually have her because she's a tree, and she can't get away from him because she's a tree.
I don't know if that's a solution or... I don't know. I don't know what Cupid was doing there exactly.
Well, Cupid's not the one who turned her into a tree. That was whoever she prayed to.
That's true. But Cupid did it in the first place because Apollo tried to say he was better than him.
Yep. And Cupid's like, no, you're not.
Just like, oh, really?
Yeah. Or Eros, Apollo,
Yeah. Okay, so what is, I guess, Cupid's main storyline in Greek mythology? Does he have one, or does he just show up in a lot of these different myths?
Well, I think his main story is him and Psyche.
Okay. So, do you want to go through that?
Yeah, so he ends up falling in love with another one of the most beautiful women ever. There's a lot of those in Greek mythology.
Yes.
And this is Psyche. She was a princess, and I can't remember. There was some drama at the beginning on how they even really got together. Mm-hmm. But so he takes her off to his castle, temple, wherever, and she is not allowed to see him, but at night when it's dark, and she's not allowed to have lights.
Right, so she's not ever actually allowed to see him. She would be in his presence when it's so dark that she couldn't see him. Okay.
And, that was kind of like their coupley deal that they made together. Is like, you can be my wife, you can live here in this totally awesome castle, you shall want for nothing. Kind of almost like a Beauty and the Beast sort of vibe going on.
Yeah. So, I have a question.
Sure.
Did he, appear to her in some other form, and that's how she met him? How did they get involved in the first place?
I really don't remember. I'd have to look that up. I don't remember the very beginning. I just remember the punchline.
Well, that's fair.
So,
is it in that book there?
I don't know. I'm only a chapter or two in.
Okay.
It might be in there somewhere.
No, I was just curious because
it had something to do with her family. I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
But
all right. Okay. So go on. So they're in this sort of Beauty and the Beast.
Right. So she's obviously super lonely, and so he allows her sisters to come by. And when her sisters come by, they're like, "Hey, you should see what he looks like. What if he's a monster? What if he's a beast? You know, what if he's ugly?"
Wouldn't that be a tragedy?
And so, you know, they're constantly egging her while they're there, being like, "You should do something so you can see him." So at night, when he's sleeping soundly by her side, she gets the oil lamp and leans it over him so she can see him, you know, make sure he's not a monster. And so she discovers he's the most beautiful thing, the most beautiful man who's ever existed. Because in something we haven't touched on yet, in older Greek and Roman myth, Cupid is not the little boy with the little wings and the cute little diaper and the cute little bow and arrow. He is a 16-year-old. And he's the most beautiful 16-year-old that there ever was, because he is supposed to be the epitome of masculinity and
beauty, which is interesting.
In the Greco-Roman tradition, like, that was the prime. That's the height of a man's sexuality. It's the height of everything that is them, is when they are like
16-year-old man.
Yeah.
It's the perfect Greek.
Right, exactly. So she holds over him and sees this just gorgeousness, like, you know, kind of like when in all of our other stories, like Supernatural, how you can't actually see God, or you can't actually see
well, that's in the Bible,
angels.
That you can't see the face of God because you would just
you
literally couldn't. The human brain can't comprehend.
To me, this
is
the
power and beauty of the divine.
To me, this is why he is a primordial God. You know, that is desire, because you can't even imagine that.
You can't really look at that because it's like looking in the face of the sun. And
he wanted her to, this is why I love this story. He wanted her to love him for him.
Right.
Not because of this magic spell that he put on her.
Right.
And so
he didn't put a spell on her.
Well, no, but that's why he didn't want her to see him.
Right. Because by looking at him, it would sort of be an automatic spell.
Right. Whoever laid eyes upon him would be absolutely in love.
Yeah.
Because he was absolutely gorgeous.
Right.
And, so that's the takeaway for me. That's the punchline for me. But so that's exactly what happens. She's like, "Oh my God, I freaking love you," and he wakes up because
did she already love him?
It doesn't quite say. I'm sure that they had, like, you know, a good kind of relationship going.
Right.
And I'm sure.
But it's the moment that she sees him that she really just like.
Right, and
goes
she
head over heels.
Totally regrets that decision, which
to look at.
We will get to later. So when she leans over him and goes, "Oh my God, he is fucking gorgeous," the hot oil falls on his chest and he wakes up, and then it's like, "What have you done? This was our deal, and you broke it. You broke all my trust. You've broken my heart. Like, I'm done. Get out." And he also flies. Actually, he's the one who's like, you know, "Fuck this shit, I'm out," and he flies away. And so she starts wandering the earth looking for him. And Venus, Aphrodite, angry mama shows up and is like, "You broke my son's heart, you little tramp." And so then she is, you know, taunting Psyche, and then Psyche's like, "I will do anything to get him back, like, just to tell him I'm sorry, and I realize how much I messed up and I broke his heart. I just want to apologize." And Venus like, "Okay, well, I'll let you see my son, but you have to prove it, because
you have to
she's
work
an evil
for
mother."
it.
Yeah. So she puts her through all of these different tests, and I don't quite remember what they are, but they're standard kind of Greek tests, like, you know, going into the underworld and not looking back sort of thing. I think the last thing was a box, and we know that in Greek mythology, if you tell a woman
don't
not
open
to
the box.
open something, don't open the jar.
Not just
don't open
Greek
the box.
mythology, by the way. That's, I mean,
in everything, you know, don't eat the apple.
It's everywhere.
Don't eat the apple, Eve.
The whole concept. I mean, I did a whole project on Pandora, and we should do an episode later, maybe, on Pandora, because there's lots to talk about there. But yeah, the whole concept of, you know, curiosity killed the cat, because
which was her downfall anyway.
You can't stop. Right.
She was curious and wanted to see his face. So essentially, She lost, and Venus shows up.
So she opens the box.
She opens the box. She loses.
She
and so she's upset, and Venus is like, ha ha ha, you're not good enough for my boy.
Uh-huh.
And then Cupid shows up, he's like, mother, stop it. She has proven...
British accent.
Yes. Because yes.
Yeah.
And he's like, she has proven that she loves me and that she's sorry. Stop being so mean to her. I love her. You know, the evil mother-in-law thing. Which you also see with Demeter and Persephone and Hades. Yep.
And, you know, in almost every human relationship.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So, is that how it ends then? Cupid finally shows up and says, okay, you've proven, even if you haven't proven it to my mother, you've proven to me that you love me.
Right, which is ridiculous that even in, you know, modern times that the man will let his mother beat and abuse her daughter-in-law before he finally says, Mommy, will you please stop?
So, I mean, I don't think it's whiny, though. I think it has to be, like, that definitive,
in this
all right, now I am taking a stand.
Yes.
You're done. This
but it
is
always
enough.
takes forever
for
the
sure.
guy to stand up to his mother-in-law, or
Right.
his mother.
Right.
Okay, so eventually...
Men, you should pay attention and, you know...
Why you gotta take so long? So, then he sweeps her up, he flies her up to, you know, the stars, to Olympus, to wherever, and she becomes a goddess. So, you know, Psyche, we also have that word in today's modern, you know, psychology, which is, you know, which is a human, the human brain system, the way we think is our psyche. And her symbol is a butterfly, like she has butterfly wings and she's all pretty, and
that's interesting.
And a butterfly, Carl Jung, am I dreaming I'm a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming I'm a man? Psyche.
Wait, what?
You never heard that? Okay, so Carl Jung had this dream, and, you know, it's a dream that he was a butterfly. Or am I a butterfly dreaming I'm a man?
Huh.
Yeah.
Carl Jung did a lot of flip-floppy things like that. Like, he has this, maybe not famous, but sort of...
I think, maybe.
Really?
I don't know. I was just guessing.
He has this sort of, maybe not famous, but idea that is... I think the way he worded it was essentially, he was questioning sort of everything, and so he
An existential crisis?
No, that's not what I mean.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me. He was saying, like, questioning perception, really, because the statement is, do human beings have ideas, or do ideas have humans?
Well, that brings us back to another Greek thing, is that the word genius, which you introduced me to this.
And I got it from Liz Gilbert.
You are not a genius, you have a genius. A genius is a, like a spirit or a god creature thing.
Yeah, it was kind of like a little house elf, actually.
That whispers
like
ideas into your head.
The ancient Greek, and this comes from Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic, which, if you haven't read that book, read that book right now.
Right now, just pause the video.
Yeah. Go to Amazon, buy it. You won't regret
Don't come back to this video until you've read that entire book. Okay.
That's not true. Come back and then go read the book.
Fine.
But she explains how the ancient Greek conception of genius was not what our modern conception is, which is that a person is a genius, but that
have a genius.
A person had a genius. A genius was like a little daemon house elf spirit thing.
And that word diamond is also Greek.
Right. Oh, is that how you say that? Diamond?
I don't... Yeah, sure.
Daemon? I don't know.
And that's where the word demon comes from, just so you know. But anyway, continue, please.
Okay. Right. So, you weren't a genius, but you had a genius, and your genius would just kind of like pop in sometimes and give you inspiration and good ideas. And that also, she ties this to come full circle. She ties this back into that idea of flow. Because that idea of flow and inspiration, when everything, like, she's a writer, so her example is, like, when you're sitting at the computer and you're writing, and, like, 90% of it is just this rough, trudging, like, you know you have to keep going even though it kind of sucks, but then, like, every so often you have these moments where it just, like, you can't really explain it, but the words are just, like, totally flowing, and, like, I have chills just talking about this. And, like,
that's all the good parts in Tell City, is when I was just, like, just magic. It was magic.
Well, that's all, like, shoot, everything half the paintings and artwork that I do is just like the best stuff comes from that time where it's just like, I don't really even know what I'm doing. I'm just playing around,
Right.
and it is working really well, so I'm going with it.
Well,
And I've had that with writing too. Like,
I
I don't write as much, but I'm trying to do more.
Good.
And that's, I get a lot of story ideas. And,
yes, you do.
And
she tells me to write them. I have my own ideas. You write them.
Yeah,
I have my own genius.
We'll see.
But
It's not just story ideas. Sometimes it's also like picture ideas,
right.
like ideas for art, and then I'm just like struggling to sketch it out before the idea goes away.
Well,
so that's exactly what she means by like that's when your genius demon spirit house elf has sort of like come and touched you and given you the idea.
And this is also where the idea of hubris comes in Greek mythology, because in today's modern world, hubris just kind of means pride. But what it specifically was thinking that you did something when really it was the gods.
Right.
So it was your genius. You haven't come up with anything, you pathetic mere mortal. These are not your ideas. These are gifts from the gods. And to come in and say that they were your ideas was hubris.
You didn't have the ideas. The ideas had you. And they used you as a vehicle to get themselves out to the world.
And Nemesis, who was another daughter of darkness and night, your nemesis it's this goddess who comes down to smite those who have hubris. Yeah, that was her specific thing.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, and this is also how we get Arachne, because she thought that she was a good weaver, right? And then Minerva comes down, or Athena, who was the goddess of weaving, said, no, you get that from me. And Arachne's like, hey, you want to have a weaving contest? Let's see. So, I don't remember what it was that Minerva weaved, but what Arachne weaved was a million times better. It was like the stories of the gods coming down and smiting and just like destroying and ruining man. And so Minerva was just like, that is pretty good. Fuck you, you're a spider now. Bam, you can weave for eternity if you like it so much.
So that's like the devil went down to Georgia, except at the end of the song, the devil gets mad and turns him into
a violin. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. But no, so that's the idea of that's Carl Jung's idea that we don't have ideas. Ideas have us, and ideas are divine and inspiration, and they come from that moment of flow when the arrow is hitting its mark, which is so cool. Something else that I wanted to touch on, because you were talking about how psyche is where we get the modern term psyche and psychology. Do you know what is the definition of psyche? Is it the human thinking and mind, or is it more like the human condition? We're going to look it up. Because that's what kind of podcast this is, and I love it.
Okay, Google.
Oh, we're going to ask Google.
If it works. Okay, Google. Etymology of psyche. So, side note. My side note is that, in the 10th kingdom, there's this old magic mirror that talks to you, but his name is Gustav. But he's a little deaf, so you have to speak up, and he only speaks in rhyme. So they're like, Gustav, Gustav, and so that's
you. That's your
that's me and my phone.
So you just need to call your phone Gustav.
Yeah. They should have. They were working on changing Google, like
so that you could rename it.
Well, not that you can say "Okay Google," but "Yo Google." Shh, I didn't mean it. Stop. No.
Oh no.
Okay. Latin of psyche, animating spirit, the soul, mind, spirit, life, one's life, the invisible animating principle or entity which occupies and directs the physical body.
Okay.
Understanding the mind, faculty, and reason.
All of that is so cool. It's the human spirit.
Right.
It's that. Okay, I love this. So, Psyche's whole problem in that Greek myth of Cupid and Psyche is that she's human and she's curious.
Yes.
Like, that's the whole thing. That's Pandora's problem.
She is the daughter of Pandora.
That is the problem.
The first woman
that
with the daughters of Eve.
That's the whole human condition, is that we're curious, and curiosity killed the cat. Like, all of that comes from curiosity. But that same curiosity is what compels us. Like, that is the human spirit.
Yep.
Because that's the thing, that's what makes humans distinct from other creatures, is that we have this sort of animating spirit and driving force, and it's that curiosity to go out and explore the unknown and make it more known. Like, and that's the call to adventure.
Yep.
Is curiosity.
Yep.
So I love how that's all tied up in there and is prevalent in the story of Cupid and Psyche.
So speaking of Cupid and Psyche, I would like you to go ahead and start reading or summarizing East of the Moon and West of the Sun, or East of the Sun, West of the Moon.
Okay.
Because I have to go pee really quick. And so you ramble. You do that.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Okay. So this is a weird connection, because, you know, this whole thing is basically just about finding weird connections in stories and myths. And so this happened to me a while back, and I don't remember now what got me thinking along these lines, but for some reason I was trying to remember the origin of this story, East of the Moon, West of the Sun. I think I had seen the phrase in something, like, online. I don't remember now why, but I know that there is this line sort of in fairy tales about things that resided east of the moon, west of the sun. And so I thought that I remembered very specifically that was a line that was common in Armenian folklore and fairy tales and stuff. And I have this book called The Flower of Paradise and Other Armenian Tales that I had gotten and read like years ago. And so for whatever reason, I saw something somewhere that reminded me of this line, East of the Moon, West of the Sun. And I couldn't remember for sure, but I thought that came from Armenian fairy tales, and particularly, or one story in particular, which is called The Flower of Paradise. And so I looked in this book, I pulled this book out and was looking it up because I just wanted to remember the details of it. And to my total shock, I couldn't find it. It's not here anywhere. It's not in the Flower of Paradise story, and then it's also not in any of the other stories, this phrase, East of the Moon, West of the Sun. And so I'm sitting there going, like, what the hell? Did I, entirely imagine this? So then I Googled the phrase, and I discovered two things. One is that I had gotten it backwards, and the phrase is actually East of the Sun, West of the Moon, and for some reason in my head, I just have flip-flopped that for all these years, and I thought that it was East of the Moon, West of the Sun.
You know, there were a couple times Neil Gaiman said that he was quoting somebody, and years later when he went back to find the original quote, he couldn't find it except for the fact where he was saying that the person said it. And I think one of those was the quote about the dragon, and there was another one, I think, about a musician.
The quote about the dragon?
That
comes from G.K. Chesterton.
Does it?
Yes.
Are you sure?
I'm
because
positive.
That's one of the things that he was saying, that he thought he had got it from Chesterton.
No, I'm positive he got that from Chesterton.
I think it's just drastically
He reworded it a lot,
drastically.
But the idea of it is from Chesterton.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. I know. Go ahead.
Sorry, that's my favorite. I love G.K. Chesterton, and I love that quote in particular, so I know that...
Right. Gaiman drastically reworded it, and then there was another quote that he said someone said, but what years later when he went back to look it up,
couldn't find it.
He couldn't find it except for when he was saying the person said it.
Right. Well, so
that's one of those instances.
It is a little bit. And so that's funny too, because in Big Magic also, Liz Gilbert talks about she tells this sort of Big Magic story where she had submitted as like a young writer, she had submitted a short fiction piece or something to a magazine, and like it got all the way to the top, and the editor-in-chief, who she really admired, I think, read it but declined it. And this was back when you were literally printing out and mailing paper submissions.
So long ago.
Well, and people would mail them back with comments.
Right.
And so she got this rejection letter, and it had like specific comments on it, I think. And so then, you know, life goes on, and she kept writing, and she eventually like got an agent, got a book deal, had a couple books under her belt, and was sort of becoming more of a thing. And so then this agent, like years later, wants to submit this same fiction piece to the same magazine, and does. And this time it's accepted, and it's the exact same editor. Reading the exact same story, and not only is accepted, but the editor's specific remarks were that she liked it so much because it reminded her of something else that she had read. And Liz Gilbert is just like, it reminded you of it. Like, it's actually, this is interesting too, because there's this whole bootstrapping paradox in...
Bootstraps?
No. No, that's pirates. The bootstrap paradox is this idea of, I think it's to do with time travel. And so the best example of it is this theory where someone in our time really, really, really loves Beethoven, especially Beethoven's Fifth. And so
that's a good one.
We have the capacity to time travel, and so this person who really, really loves Beethoven's Fifth,
I know this one,
goes back in time because he wants to meet Beethoven. So he goes back to the time and the place of Beethoven, and he just shows up and he starts asking around, where's Beethoven? Where's Beethoven? No one has any idea who he's talking about. No one has ever heard of Beethoven. And this guy is just so confused because he's just like, what do you mean? But you know, he tries and he can't find Beethoven. There is no Beethoven. And so then he starts to really panic and be like, oh my God, well, we can't live in a world without Beethoven. And luckily he has he has the sheet music and everything of Beethoven. And so he thinks like, well, if Beethoven's not here and he's not writing this, someone has to. So I'm going to pretend to be Beethoven. And he starts releasing the Beethoven symphonies. And so... that's a cool thought experiment, but the paradox is, who wrote Beethoven in the first place?
Right.
Because he wasn't writing it originally, he was copying it from the future where Beethoven exists. But then he went back in time and Beethoven didn't exist, and then Beethoven only exists because he wrote it. The question is, who wrote Beethoven's Fifth? I had
a similar one. It was all the same thing essentially, but where he liked Beethoven's Fifth so much he went back in time, and Beethoven's like, no, I haven't written this yet. And then he's like, here it is. And
that's the same sort of thing. Yeah. The example I heard is just a little more extreme.
Well, in the reality where all possible realities exist, and there's, layers and layers of parallel dimensions on top of each other, does it really matter?
Who knows?
Anyway. Who said paradoxes weren't allowed?
Anyway, so I did have a little bit of this same moment of just not understanding, like, where did I get this idea from? Because I swore that it came from this particular fairy tale, and not just this fairy tale, but that it was prevalent in a bunch of Armenian tales. And so, aside from being, like, personally devastating, because this was such an important...
It was a part of your personal mythology.
It was such a cool thing to me, and also, like, I am Armenian and very proud of that, and so... to find out that wasn't actually where that came from was sort of personally devastating. But then also I was just like, okay, well, where did this come from? And I still don't know where I picked it up, because I ended up Googling it, And so I discovered, first of all, that I had the words backwards, that it was not east of the moon, west of the sun, that it's east of the sun, west of the moon, and that second of all, it's this whole Norwegian fairy tale. And so I'm going to sort of summarize it here, because, and you'll see how it ties in to the whole Cupid and Psyche story.
I'm even wearing my anatomical heart today.
Well, of course you are. Did you not do that on purpose?
No, I did not.
Well, that's just further,
I can't say that. I can spell that word, but I can't say that word.
Synchronicity?
No,
Anatomical.
Anatomical.
There you go.
I can spell it, but I can't say it.
Which is interesting since you're dyslexic.
Right. And in Intel City, Cupid has anatomical hearts as
cufflinks. Right. Which is why the anatomical heart painting is so near and dear to her heart. Okay. So anyway,
to my heart.
Yes.
Sorry. Late reaction.
Okay. So I've Googled and I'm reading this story, East of the Sun, West of the Moon, for I think the first time, although who knows, maybe I've read it before. So once upon a time, there was a poor peasant who had so many children that he did not have enough of either food or clothing to give them. Pretty children they all were, but the prettiest was the youngest daughter, who was so lovely there was no end to her loveliness. One day, the weather was wild and rough outside, and it was cruelly dark. The rain was falling and the wind blowing until the walls of the cottage shook. They were all sitting around the fire, busy with this thing and that. Then all at once, something gave 3 taps on the window. The father... Yes, like that. The father went out to see what was the matter. Outside, what should he see but a great big white bear? Good evening to you, said the white bear. The same to you, said the man. Will you give me your youngest daughter? If you will, I'll make you as rich as you are now poor, said the bear. Well, the man would not be at all sorry to be so rich, but still he thought he must have a bit of a talk with his daughter first. So he went in and told them how there was a great white bear waiting outside, who had given his word to make them so rich if he could only have the youngest daughter. The girl said no outright. Nothing could get her to say anything else. So the man went out and settled it with the white bear, that he should come again the next Thursday evening and get an answer. In the meantime, he talked to his daughter and kept on telling her of all the riches they would get and how well off she herself would be. At last she agreed to it, so she washed and mended her rags and made herself as smart as she could. Soon she was ready for the trip, for she didn't have much to take along. The next Thursday evening came, and the white bear to fetch her. She got on his back with her bundle, and off they went. After they had gone a good way, the white bear said, "Are you afraid?" No, she wasn't. "Just hold tight to my shaggy coat, and there's nothing to be afraid of," said the bear.
Oh.
She rode a long, long way until they came to a large, steep cliff. The white bear knocked on it. A door opened, and they came into a castle, where there were many rooms all lit up, rooms gleaming with silver and gold. Further, there was a table set there, and it was all as grand could be. Then the white bear gave her a silver bell, and when she wanted anything, she only had to ring it, and she would get it at once. Well, after she had eaten, and it became evening, she felt sleepy from her journey, and thought that she would like to go to bed, so she rang the bell. She had barely rung it before she found herself in a room where there was a bed made as fair and white as anyone could wish to sleep in, with silken pillows and curtains and gold fringe. All that was in the room was gold or silver. After she had gone to bed and put out the light, a man came and laid himself alongside her. It was the white bear, who cast off his pelt at night, but she never saw him, for he always came after she had put out the light. Before the day dawned, he was up and off again. Things went on happily for a while, but at last she became quiet and sad. She was all alone all day long, and she became very homesick to see her father and mother and brothers and sisters. So one day, when the white bear asked what was wrong with her, she said it was so lonely there, and how she longed to go home to see her father and mother and brothers and sisters, and that was why she was so sad, because she couldn't get to them. Well, said the bear, that can happen all right, but you must promise me not to talk alone with your mother, but only when the others are around to hear. She will want to take you by the hand and lead you into a room to talk alone with her. But you must not do that, or else you'll bring bad luck on both of us.
Okay. Sorry, this is just going to take a while. Can we summarize from here, or?
Yes. So, basically, she does go back home and she talks to her family, and
particularly her mother.
Yeah, she like tries to resist her mother, who does exactly what the Prince Bear says she's gonna do, and tries to get her to talk alone. She eventually gets her to, and then she says essentially the same thing of like, well, it might be a troll you're sleeping with, so you have to find out. And she even says like, I'll give you advice to see him, I'll even give you a candle stub. So the girl like hides this candle stub in her dress somewhere, and to hide it from him. And then that night, she actually, on the way home, the bear specifically asks her, like, did you talk to your mother? And she does confess that, yeah, she had talked to her. And the bear says, well, you know, be careful. If you listen to your mother's advice, you will bring bad luck on both of us, and it will be finished with the two of us.
And then?
And so, she, that very night, you know, after he falls asleep and she can hear that he's fast asleep, she gets up and she lights the candle, and she lets the light shine on him, and saw that he was the most handsome prince one had ever set eyes on. She fell so deeply in love with him that she thought she couldn't live if she didn't give him a kiss at once. And so she did, but as she kissed him, she let 3 drops of hot tallow drip onto his shirt, and he woke up.
And then?
And then, of course, he is distraught and says, you can't, like, how could you do this?
I am heartbroken.
Well, and in this case, she says specifically, you've made us both unlucky, for had you held out only this 1 year, I would have been free. I have a stepmother who has bewitched me so that I'm a white bear by day and a man by night. But now all ties are broken between us. Now I must leave you for her. She lives in a castle east of the sun and west of the moon, and there too is a princess, one with a nose 3 yards long, which is a very long nose. That's like 9 feet.
Now he has to go marry a troll.
Right, he has to go marry a troll because
this stupid girl couldn't get her act together.
Well, she was too curious. So
selfish.
she cried and grieved, but there was no help for it. He had to go. Tell me the way then, she said, so I can look for you. Surely I may do that. And yes, she could, but there was no way leading to the place because it was a castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon, and she'd never find her way there.
And so she wanders the earth.
Right, so the next morning she wakes up, the prince, the castle, everything around her has just disappeared, and she's totally distraught. And then eventually she sort of like cries herself out and then gets up to wander around. So she wanders around and comes to a woman who had a golden apple. And then the girl asks the woman if she knows the way to the prince who lived with his stepmother in this castle east of the sun, west of the moon. The prince said, the woman says, how did you come to know about him? Maybe you're the girl who should have had him. And it says, yes, she was. Well, all I know about him is that he lives in the castle east of the sun and west of the moon, and you'll get there too late or never, but still you may borrow my horse and you can ride him to my next neighbor. Maybe she will be able to tell you. And when you get there, just give the horse a switch under the left ear and beg him to be off home. And also you can take this golden apple with you. So she gets on the horse, she goes to the next neighbor. The next neighbor is an old woman who has a gold comb.
Like Snow White.
Yes, like Snow White. Apple also like Snow White.
Yeah.
And so basically we go through the same story with, I think, 4 women. So she gets the golden apple and the same story, and then a golden comb and the same story of like, well, all I know is that where he lives. I don't know how to get there, but maybe this person will know. And then she also gets a golden spinning wheel. So there's Cinderella. And then the same story. And then, let's see here.
Do all these things?
Oh no, it's only 3 women. Of course, it's 3 women. It's only 3 women. So from the 3 women, she gets the golden apple, the golden comb, and the golden spinning wheel. The 3rd woman says that she doesn't know, but maybe
Strife, Aphrodite, and Athena.
Yep, or the 3 fates.
Or the 3 Norns.
Right.
Or Hecate.
Yeah, three's
all
a
the
pretty
three-faced
common. So the third woman who gives her the spinning wheel, instead of sending her to another person, tells her to go ask the East Wind. And so she goes and she finds the East Wind, and he also doesn't know, of course. He'd heard of it. Everyone's heard of this castle, but no one knows how to get there. So the East Wind says he doesn't know, but maybe his brother will. And so he will take her to his brother, the West Wind. Maybe he knows he's much stronger. So the East Wind takes her to the West Wind, and then here again we repeat the same thing 4 times. So we go to the East Wind, and then to the West Wind, and then to the
South Wind and the North Wind?
Yeah, to the South Wind, and the South Wind also doesn't know, and then the South Wind takes her to the North Wind, who is the oldest and strongest. And the South Wind says, if he doesn't know where it is, you'll never find anyone in the world. So the South Wind takes her to the North Wind. The North Wind says, yes, I know where it is. A single time I blew an aspen leaf there, but afterwards I was so tired that I couldn't blow a puff for many days. But if you really wish to go there and aren't afraid to come along with me, I'll take you on my back and see if we can get there. So yes, she did with all her heart. And the North says, very well then. So the next morning they get up and the North Wind puffs and puffs and puffs. And
he blows her house down?
Not quite, but he blows her all the way to the castle, east of the sun and west of the moon. So she finally makes it there. And then the girl finds the castle and just sits down under a castle window and is playing with the golden apple. The first person she saw was the 9-foot-long nosed princess, who was supposed to have the prince. And this princess asked her, what do you want for your golden apple, you girl? And the girl says, it's not for sale for gold or money. And the princess says, if it's not for sale for gold or money, what is it that you will sell it for? You may name your own price. And the girl says, well, you can have it if I may get to the prince who lives here and be with him tonight. Yes, that could be done. So the princess took the golden apple.
Somebody's confident.
And the girl came to the prince's bedroom that night when he was fast asleep. But he was fast asleep and basically wouldn't wake up. She called him and shook him and cried and grieved, but she couldn't wake him up.
Yeah, he was under some sort of curse.
Mm-hmm. You're not wrong. So basically we repeat this thing for 3 days. First with the golden apple, then with the golden comb, then with the golden spindle. And then on the 3rd day...
I have a feeling someone was trying to put a child to sleep that was just super hyper. I wouldn't go in, like, you know how it is, like, you keep on telling the story, making up the story until the kid falls asleep, and then you go blah, 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 and slip out of the room with the story unfinished. So the person was just, like, trying and trying and trying to get this child to go to sleep, and it just wouldn't happen.
Maybe. But I think there's also something powerful in a repetition of 3.
Yeah. Maybe.
I think there's more to it than just that. So on the 3rd day, so after the golden apple and the comb, but before the night with the spindle, there were some Christians, and this is a weird thing that suddenly gets thrown into the story, is suddenly there's some Christians who were there, also in the room, or also in the castle, staying in a room next to the princess.
See, this is a tired parent that just wants to go to bed.
Well, a lot gets compounded in myths.
I'm making a joke.
I know.
Okay.
It is funny, though. This was all of a sudden some Christians. And so these Christians were in the room next to the princes, and so they had heard the past 2 nights how a woman had been in there who was crying and praying and calling to him and wanting him to wake up. And so they tell the prince the next day, like, hey, weird thing.
This
We
girl.
keep hearing this girl in your room just trying to wake you up, and it's not working. So that's a little strange. And so the prince figures it out, and he figured it out just like you did, Kay. And apparently the princess every night had been, well, the long-nosed princess had been coming to the prince every night and giving him, I don't know, tea or something, but that's actually a sleeping potion. And so he figures out that he should not drink this tea this night, but he pretends to drink it. So the princess thinks he's drunk it. He doesn't actually. And then when the girl comes in on the third night in exchange for the spinning wheel, he actually is awake. And so she tells him the whole story of her journey to get there.
Confesses her love and regret.
Right. And the prince says, well, you've come in the nick of time. Tomorrow's the wedding day. But now I won't have the long nose, for you are the only woman in the world who can set me free. So here's what we're going to do. And he basically says that before the wedding, he's going to propose a test to see to make sure that this long-nosed princess bride will be fit for a wife. And so this test is that he's going to beg her to wash the shirt, which has the 3 spots of tallow on it. So the shirt that the girl stained. She'll agree, for she doesn't know that you were the one who put them there. And this is an interesting thing. Only Christians and not such a pack of trolls can wash them out again. I'll say that I will marry only the woman who can wash them out and ask you to try it. So this is the plan, and this is what he does. He says, the next day, right before the wedding, he says, I've got this fine shirt, which I'd like for my wedding shirt, but somehow or other, it got 3 spots of tallow on it, which I must have washed out. I have sworn to marry only the woman who is able to do that, and if this princess can't, then she's not worth having. So they said, well, that's easy. I'm sure, of course. And so she tries to wash it out, but the more she rubbed and scrubbed, the bigger the spots grew. And then the troll woman, her mother, says, oh, well, you can't wash it, let me try. But she had hardly touched the shirt before it got far worse than before. And with all her rubbing and wringing and scrubbing, the spots grew bigger and blacker. Then all the other trolls begin to try, and it just gets worse and worse and worse until the whole shirt is just totally black.
And then the Christians.
Right. And then the prince says, well, none of you is worth a straw. You can't wash. Why, there outside sits a beggar girl. I bet she knows how to wash better than the whole lot of you. And so she gets called in and is asked if she can wash the shirt. And she says, I don't know, but I think I can. And then it says, almost before she had taken it and dipped it into the water, it was as white as driven snow. So you're the girl for me, said the prince. At that, the old troll woman flew into such a rage that she exploded on the spot, and the princess with the long nose after her, and the whole pack of trolls after her. At least I've never heard a word about them since. So then as for the prince and princess, they set free all the poor Christians who had been captured there, and they took with them all the silver and gold and flew away as far as they could, away from the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon. So that's the story of East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which is not the story of the Flower of Paradise, but is essentially Cupid and Psyche. Like, it's the same thing.
Right.
And I want to, but I haven't yet looked into, like, which of those stories was written first. Like,
written. I got on the nose with oral tradition being passed from
location
to location.
But Norway is not exactly that's not exactly a neighbor of Greek and Rome. Although I think the ancient peoples traveled further than we think they did.
You gotta think that, civilization kind of started in one general area and spread out, and a lot of these symbols and ideas are part of our Carl Jung collective consciousness, collective subconsciousness.
Right.
And the stories are kind of inherent in us, no matter how far away you get. And that's something else we can definitely talk about in another video, is where stories that are almost exactly the same show up in different parts of the world with no one having contact with one another. Right.
Well, okay, and so here's the last sort of weird threads of commonality here, because that story is Cupid and Psyche, and obviously Cupid and Psyche is similar to the Beauty and the Beast story, and I think actually that particular version of it kind of unites the two, especially because it's very Beauty and the Beast at the beginning. This poor, man, has like all these sons and daughters, and the youngest one is the most beautiful, and she gets taken away So yeah, it's sort of like it's Beauty and the Beast, and then it turns into Cupid and Psyche when they get to the castle.
Goes back to Beauty and the Beast because he's cursed.
Right.
By an evil woman, by an evil stepmother, and that is very. The evil stepmother thing is actually very like, Grimm's Tales, because in a lot of the Grimm Tales originally was an evil stepmother, it was an evil father, and they changed it.
Well, that's interesting.
I know.
And actually, we'll have to do an entire episode on Beauty and the Beast, because I recently read the original Beauty and the Beast, and it's longer. I have it. You can borrow it.
Okay.
It's longer and more. Like, it involves actual fairies a lot more. Like, there's a lot more backstory for both the prince and the princess. For both Belle and the prince. And it's really good. I really enjoyed it. And you can see that, like, the Disney movie.
Yeah.
It takes those same threads. But, anyway, so...
Save that for another video.
Right. So I'm looking for East of the Moon, West of the Sun, which doesn't exist, but instead I find East of the Sun, West of the Moon, which turns out to be basically Beauty and the Beast mixed with Cupid and Psyche. And then this is where it gets really weird, because I was so convinced that that phrase had come from this Armenian tale, The Flower of Paradise. So this is much shorter, and I'm going to just quickly read The Flower of Paradise, and you guys will see these connections.
All right.
Okay, so, long ago, a merchant lived in our country. He had a daughter who was so beautiful that everyone called her Flower. She really was like a flower, tender and beautiful. Her father was very proud of her. One day, as the merchant was preparing to travel to distant lands on business, he asked his daughter, "What would you like me to bring home for you?" "Father, please bring me the Flower of Paradise." "Very well, I'll get it for you," he replied.
Spoiled.
The merchant traveled to distant lands and completed his business there. Then he began searching for the Flower of Paradise. He asked about it everywhere, but no one knew how to grow it or where to look for it. Finally, he met an old man who pointed out the way to the Flower of Paradise. "But be careful," warned the old man. "The white dove guards the flower." But do you think that could discourage the father's loving heart? No, indeed. The merchant set out down the road the old man had pointed out. Whether he walked for a long or short time, only he knows. Finally, he came to the place where the Flower of Paradise grew. The merchant saw the flower, bent over, and picked it. Suddenly, a violent storm arose. It grew dark, and a horrible monster stood before the merchant. The monster was man-like, but it wasn't a man. It was beast-like, but it wasn't a beast. The monster began roaring madly. "Why did you pick my flower? Now you must die for your transgression." "Now you must die," echoed from all directions. The poor merchant, half alive, bowed to the monster. "Spare me, O mighty creature. My daughter asked me to bring home the flower." "I will spare you," roared the monster, "only under one condition. You must give me your daughter in exchange for your life." "Agreed," said the merchant.
Douche.
"Since that is the case, I
It was
grant
a
your
different
life.
time.
Return home and remember this. When the mountain opposite the windows of your home turns white, it will be a sign that I am coming after your daughter." Of course, the monster was none other than the white dove. Meanwhile, the merchant returned home. His daughter ran to meet him, embraced him, placing her hands around his neck, and kissed him. The father embraced his daughter
The
and
loving
handed
and doted
her
daughter that he just sold off.
the Flower of Paradise. He decided not to tell her what had happened. He decided not to tell anyone his secret, and he became very depressed when he thought about the future. Days and nights flew by as he thought about what had happened. He became more and more gloomy and sad. One morning, when he awoke, the merchant noticed that the mountain located opposite the windows of his home was covered with white snow. The merchant broke into tears. People came running and began asking the reason for his tears. The merchant could no longer hide the fact that he had promised to give his daughter to the monster. He told them that the white dove was coming after Flower. "Don't cry, father," said Flower. "I'll go with the white dove. One can't escape one's fate." Meanwhile, thunder
Can't escape your father
resounded.
selling you off for his own life. Rude.
Rude. I think there's more to it than that. Meanwhile, thunder resounded. The white dove broke into the house, roaring, "Where is Flower? Where is she? Give her to me." The surrounding trees began trembling and became covered with ice because of the white dove's roar and his cold breath. What could Flower's parents do? Dressed in her best clothes and holding the Flower of Paradise in her hand, Flower went to meet the white dove. And something interesting here is the white dove is this sort of spirit monster thing in these Armenian tales, and it's often compared to a dragon, although not quite a dragon. So the monster laughed triumphantly. He grabbed the beautiful maiden and carried her away. Flapping his wings, the white dev raised such a storm that his hissing and whistling swallowed the light. Everything froze and died wherever the white dev flew. The monster carried Flower to the deepest ravine on Mount Ararat. It was an inaccessible, gloomy place covered with ice. There stood the crystal castle of the white dev, which he abandoned from time to time to wander the earth. Wherever the white dev traveled, he attempted to destroy every living creature. Cold and terror followed his footsteps all over the earth. The white dev incarcerated Flower in his cold castle. Several months passed. At the beginning of spring, when the white dev was not in the castle, Flower managed to run away. The monster returned, noticing that the maiden wasn't where she should be. He flew into a rage. The white dev gathered all his evil forces and set out in pursuit of Flower. Turning into a storm, whistling and hissing, he pursued Flower like a giant dragon. Meanwhile, the maiden had reached the foothills of Mount Ararat. She looked around and saw that the white dev was overtaking her. It was horrible and frightening. The poor maiden gave a piercing shriek, crying out for help. It was God's will that at that moment a magic door opened before her. Passing through it, the maiden went into the interior of the mountain. The door immediately closed behind her under the white dev's very nose. The monster's rage knew no bounds. He beat the summit of Mount Ararat with his wings and roared, "Where is Flower? Where is she? Give her to me." While we leave the white dev there, roaring while we follow Flower. We'll find out what happened to her after she passed through the magic door. After passing through the interior of Mount Ararat, Flower found herself beside a garden fence. The garden resembled paradise. From the thousands of discordant sounds that permeated the garden, this song took shape. In an emerald palace in a golden coffin, enchanted by dark powers, lies our Aaron in his bower, and the whole world is in mourning. He will lie there until, like a dove, she appears. Full of new life and joy, she'll hug and kiss our boy. Flower entered the garden, which was filled with rejoicing and happy songs. "Here she comes, our princess. Over here, your beloved is here. Now he'll be resurrected from death so drear, our brave enchanted Aaron. Now our glorious prince arises, our mighty prince, Aaron, our Manolin. His bright eyes smile at us radiantly. The world's flowers and trees, so unhappily enchanted by the white dev, will waken from the monster's evil spell. Joyful life will be revived as well, as will fragrant sunlit dells." Flower walked across the garden and into the Emerald Palace. In the center of the palace there was a golden coffin, in which a handsome young prince lay. He was neither alive nor dead. He was barely breathing. As soon as Flower saw him, her heart was filled with grief. She burst into tears. Then she bent over the prince and kissed him. Flower's teardrops fell into the youth's face. Slowly the prince opened his eyes and arose. He was like a birch tree growing in paradise. You have probably already guessed who he was. Yes, it was Aaron, our Manolin. "Who are you, beautiful maiden?" asked Aaron. "How did you get here?" Flower told the prince everything about her imprisonment by the white dev. She added the information that he was chasing her even at that moment. "I can hear his hellish roar," she said. "He put a spell on me several months ago, sending down a dream of death," said Aaron. "He does so every year. I am here until someone comes and destroys the evil spell. You are one of those who has done so, Flower. Now I will go fight the white dev." After uttering these words, Aaron took his fiery sword and left. The two powers merged in a battle to the death. They fought so that no one could distinguish between sky and earth. The white dev roared like a dark cloud. Aaron our Manolin struck right and left with his sword, and the earth shook. The battle ended with the defeat of the white dev. Howling, hissing, and whistling, he crawled back to his gloomy abode, located on the bottom of the deep ravine on Mount Ararat. He shut himself up there in his crystal castle. Peace fell to the lot of his fair victor. Happy days came to the valley of the Eryx River. Aaron our Manolin married Flower. Nature spread a beautiful carpet of roses and other flowers at their feet. People and animals, birds, and even choruses of ants sang merry songs and hymns to them. Above them in the heavens stretched a marvelous bright rainbow, and the fresh spring sun smiled down on the earth. These events are repeated every year. Every year, the White Dove manages to place a spell on Aaron Armanolin, and every year the spell loses its power when Flower comes to rescue him.
Yeah, this is
So
a story that we should have read different, probably talk for like Hades and Persephone.
Well, so that's what's interesting is that this story, which I thought was East of the Moon, I thought that something about where they go to is in a castle east of the moon, west of the sun. And when I reread it, obviously, I have discovered that it's not there anywhere. Instead, it's a story that basically starts off as Beauty and the Beast.
Right.
And ends up as sort of... It's almost like a little bit Sleeping Beauty, a little bit Snow White, and then very much Hades and Persephone.
I like how the princesses save the day in these stories.
Right. And so it's Beauty and the Beast, at least for the first half of it is almost word for word Beauty and the Beast. And also, that makes it very similar to the fairy tale that is actually titled East of the Sun, West of the Moon. So it's almost like I had it right, even though I had it completely wrong.
Princesses need to stop getting kidnapped and taken to towers and castles, I'll tell you what. All right.
Well, we'll have to do a whole other podcast where we talk about that whole trope and sort of the psychology behind that.
Yeah. So, all right. Let's at least wrap this one up.
Right.
Because God knows it's going to take forever to upload. But
that's okay. Do you have any last things to say about Cupid or Psyche or any of that?
Man, love is complicated. There you go. Love and desire.
Love is definitely complicated.
Yeah, and the 16-year-old boy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm sorry, man. He might get offended if I call him a boy. He'd at least glare at me a little.
Yeah.
I'd get glared at. Okay. So I think that wraps that up anyway. So.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you guys for watching.
Bye.